welcome back to the channel folks and to another battle report. This time I've got a couple of games that I played at the Games Hub in Edinburgh at a meet that was arranged by Gareth. I've never played in the Games Hub before, though I've played quite a few of the guys that were there before, and also played some new guys in these games. But if from Edinburgh and you're looking for Flames of War players, as well as our group that plays in Bathgate, which is just along the road really, there is also the Games Hub, so you can check it out. Now, I was playing Allies in this game. We just did a simple Axis Allies split, and I brought my Soviet heavy assault guns. I wanted to give them a try, and it was quite a, shall we say, informative, educational couple of games for me. So I've decided not only to make this a battle report, but to look at the lists, what I brought, what I learned, and what would I think about in the way of changes to the list. So if you're interested in some thoughts on the heavy assault guns, check this out. Let's start by having a look at the list that I have been playing and that I brought with me. Here is the list I am bringing today. It's got two formations and a little bit of support. First of all is the heavy assault guns, which is a company command, platoon of 4 ISU 122s, platoon of 3 ISU 152s, and the submachine gunners. Now there's already quite a lot of infantry on the table here, but I've taken these guys because if you imagine maybe that got killed and they got killed and that was what was left and they were entirely intact, they'd be broken, whereas these guys can help them stay on the table. Now, it means that I tend not to be too aggressive with these guys. These have also got 1 point each for the anti-aircraft MGs. And then backing them up, we have this Hero shock rifle, or it's just shock rifle formation, company command, standard platoon, 13 bases plus commissar, and then the storm group, which is 7 submachine gun bases, a mortar, a heavy machine gun, in fact 2 heavy machine guns, there should be another one there, and the anti-tank rifle base. Now, let's just get that right, folks. There you go. So these guys are, you know, careful, fearless veteran. So I always hope that they'll do a lot. You know, the mortar might be quite effective as it's a veteran mortar. At the very least, they'll be hard to hit. Or so I hope. And then backing them up, we have these 122mm howitzers with an observer. So there's a lot of heavy artillery options here, because remember these guys can fire artillery too. So this is my starting point, folks. Now we'll go over to the games and see how they do. So let's have a look at the first game. Now, I knew there was a Panther list on the German side, so I thought to myself, I hope I don't play that Panther list, because they're just going to bully my small number of tanks and front armour 9. Doesn't make much of a difference when you're getting shot at by anti-tank 14, you're on a wing and a prayer. Their 40-inch range against my 28-inch range at best isn't very good either. So, you know what happened next? I was drawn against the Panthers. Then there was the table that we played on. I had to thank Gareth personally for that table. As you'll see, one side of the table is lengthwise is a big long line of hills, and the other side has got a couple of woods but is otherwise flat and exposed, which is like perfect territory to go hunting with Panther tanks. So if I was going to attack, I had to attack from those hills. So we rolled off for a mission and got in counter. So we were both going to be half off, half on. And we rolled to see the attacker, and it was the Panthers. So as you'll see when the game develops, I don't really have anywhere to hide, and the hills have eyes. Anyway, let's get over to deployment now and see how the game played out and if my big heavies were able to stand toe to toe against those Panthers. The storm group is on the objective on the left, as you can see, quite exposed. In the centre is my 122s and my ISU 122s, and then it's shock rifles on the far flank. They're facing an open objective, but reserves could come in at any time with the Panthers. 4 Panthers there, one of them's HQ, could swing over. There's another 3 Panthers and 4 Werbel in reserve. And then you've got like Panzer Grenadiers facing down the storm group. The artillery's in the centre, so it can look either way in the absence of an observer, and the 122's hiding. So the Panzer Grenadiers are moving out, and on the hill the Panthers are staying put, shooting down, and then trying shooting scoots, not very successfully, but shooting down at the 122's, getting 2 hits but no kills. My first turn was artillery, the 122's, the ISU's, and a single mortar from the storm group, accurately shooting the half-tracks but only one bale. Kenny didn't like that artillery fire and dismounted his infantry, putting them behind the wall, edging the half-tracks up out of anti-tank rifle range, and the Panthers pretty much stayed put so they could fire downrange, and they finally killed one of the exposed 122's. In my turn, Kenny realised he has made a mistake because my artillery, his 3 templates, completely smashed his infantry to bits. Largely due to some terrible saving throws on his part, but the infantry platoon that dismounted is down to 3 bases now, which is they're effectively out of the game. Now, recently my artillery dice rolling has been ridiculously good, I'll admit that, but I did predict to Kenny that my anti-tank fire would be terribly bad, and I was right. So Kenny's gone off my artillery and he's trying to figure out how to move forward but get rid of the threat, you know, shoot down range here. And so he's blitzing. He's had a bit of trouble with his tactical dice rolling, but he is blitzing and moving forward, getting the guns in better line of sight, but also keeping some forward momentum to try and get these guys. That's where he's headed, folks, with that platoon of Panthers at least. So my ISUs are still hiding. They can't really get the jump on these Panthers because they're slow moving. So I'm just keeping them there, maybe thinking I could get a side shot and just continuing with the bombardments. As you can see, there is just 1 base of infantry left there now. So there's going to be a lot of last stands needed. But I'm running out of things to shoot at without sticking my neck out. So I maybe need some reserves, as does Kenny. Kenny's Panthers are now coming in from reserves and he rolled for the opposite corner, but that's going to give him some opportunities to do a pincer attack on my centre or to get that objective with the shock rifles on it. And his Panthers on the other side of the table are moving up to take on the objective with the shock rifles. So I'm kind of stuck here, not really knowing what to do, folks. If I get some reserves on in the right place, then I might be able to turn things around, but I'm in a bad place. Kenny's shooting. Some Panthers fired at the exposed ends of the IS 122 platoon, but got no hits. The other Panthers heading towards my left objective fired downrange at the 122 artillery and got a kill, and also tried some MG fire at the infantry with no effect. My first reserves arrived in the same corner as the Panthers, so I placed them in their flank, hoping to get some hits, and moved my 122s up to support them. And as it was, the 122s missed, needed 6s, the 152s needed 5s with 3 dice, and managed to get 1 kill. So that is at least 1 dead Panther. But on the other side, to be honest, it's looking grim, and I maybe shouldn't have moved my 122s away. That Panzer Grenadier is still staying, and the last reserves arrive, the Werbel winds. My infantry won't like them. And then on the other side of the table, the Panthers have blitzed up onto the hill to get some shots onto the ISU 152s, and other Panthers are setting themselves up for an assault. It's all gone horribly wrong very quick. But only one 152 was bailed, that was it, but the assault went well. The Panthers kept passing the motivation, and they were hitting well with their good skill. So I broke off in the end after losing 4 bases, and I've got very little infantry left to face those tanks. My company commander arrived in the corner again, but no hits at all on the Panthers, folks. No leverage there. I moved infantry up to try and see if they could help, maybe get some bales, kill some bales, but nothing happened over there, folks, unfortunately. And on the other side, I moved my 122s over to get shots on the Panthers to try and help my storm group, but once again, no hits. And that's not surprising, really, when you consider there was some concealment and the slow moving rule. So not a lot of kills against the Panthers. So it came down to another very good Panther assault, very effective, managed to hit me 3 times out of 3, and then being fearless, my guys then immediately ran away. My only hope there was that the one base that could move into contact would motivate and then at least force those Panthers to run away, and hope that I could get some reserves in the following turn. But wasn't to be, folks. It was a very clear victory for Kenny and the Panthers. Well, that was quite an easy win in the end for the Panthers and for Kenny. It could have maybe gone differently if my reserves had arrived in a place where they could support my threatened objective. There's also the option I had at the start of chasing my infantry off against that open objective on Kenny's left, my right. But I would only have been guaranteed 2 turns of movement without being machine gunned to bits. And I know myself from experience what happens to aggressive infantry when they're caught in the open. So I decided to wait until I got some support in. And then I went, but it was too late. And the support didn't help them anyway. But maybe I should have gone earlier and just taken a chance and maybe pulled reserves away or pulled those central Panthers away off to protect that objective. So there's a wee lesson for me. And also in a game against so many Panthers, I probably should have chosen defence. My list wasn't set up to be split into reserves. I never considered that when I put it together. And it's quite hard to do that with that list because of the exact point settings for my core formation. It was tricky, but what I should have done, I think, was chosen defence, because then I would have had at least 4 ISU 122s in ambush with a chance of destroying a Panther platoon maybe, or gutting it in 1 turn of shooting. Whereas in an encounter type mission, I was somehow going to have to get myself into range and line of sight without being destroyed myself. And then maybe my reserves could have come in a bit more effectively on the side, or moving more directly towards protecting objectives if there was no scattered element. So I think the lesson for me there was maybe be more aggressive when you're playing these firefight missions, but also when I've got this particular list against lots of well-armoured good anti-tank, is to take a defensive stance. Now the second game was against Finn, who was playing Finns. I've not got any video footage of this, I've just got stills. I'm going to talk over the stills. The reason for that is Finn was just trying out his Finnish list, and he had a lot of proxies, and nearly everything was unpainted, so it wouldn't necessarily make a good video battle report, but it is going to give us lots of relevant points, because unlike the first game where I was up against sort of top-notch tanks, in this game I'm up against top-notch infantry. Lots of infantry with some anti-tank, a little bit of their own tanks, but not the most effective. The best is a T-34-85, but the infantry themselves have got lots of Fausts, including that Panzerfaust Defence Platoon, whatever it's called, and the card that allows units to do Tank Assault 3. That's one of the Finnish cards. So this was going to be a completely different game, I'm the attacker, Finn's the defender. I think that's fairly obvious in this matchup. So I have got to somehow break them down and take them apart and withstand all the likely crazy assaults that would be coming my way too. So let's go over and get started with that one. Let's start with my deployment. You can see the 122 mils on the near side. In front of them are the submachine guns, the Hero submachine guns. In the middle of the table is the shock rifles. Then on the far side we have the Storm Group along with all of the heavy assault guns. Now the terrain in this board, by the way, is much easier to play on for my respect, and probably other players as well, but there's no hills, so I've gone from nothing but hills to no hills at all. This one's got lots of fields, woods and a few buildings. Now the finished deployment, first of all you can see there is an objective beside the crossroads and one beside the two houses there. Now nearest us there is just a standard kind of infantry platoon. Next to them a submachine gun platoon. They're not on the objective because I smothered it in 3 pre-ranged in markers, 122 mils to them and a 152 mil. So the Finns backed off, ready to move on as required. Then in the corner of the field on the far side is a couple of heavy machine guns, and then you see the Panzerfaust platoon just further beyond them, and then behind them there is a mortar platoon, a heavy mortar platoon near the bottle that you can see, and another infantry platoon beside the house, which leaves all of the tanks in reserve. So my turn 1, you've got the submachine guns moving up on the flank. I've left one base on the near side of that minefield just because it helps block reserves coming through there. The Hero rifles are moving up to that church. On the other side though, I'm staying put. Nothing's moving up quite yet, apart from a couple of heavy machine guns who want to get in range of that Panzerfaust platoon that the Finns use. Then that's all going to stay put. My plan here is to do as many turns as possible of bombardments to try to reduce the effectiveness of the defenders' artillery, so that my own infantry can move up, and then I'll race up towards the objective. One thing I should say though is the company commander is just behind the church. He's moved up just so I've got something ready just in case to move in to within 8 inches of the objective. My shooting didn't get any casualties, but it ranged in on some very important targets, specifically the mortars. And then in the finished turn, no reserves yet folks, it's turn 3, they'll be coming on. No ambush popped yet because the 2.40s are pretty far away from my tanks, so I just left some shooting, and the 81mm, the medium mortars, ranged in right beside the church and caused a couple of casualties. The 120mm ranged in on the far side to try and get heavy machine guns, mortars and submachine guns from the Storm Group, and of course the only thing that got killed was the very useful mortar from the Storm Group. And that's the way it goes with this platoon, guys. You always seem to lose the most interesting thing in it first. Soviet turn 2, I'm parking my infantry up by that church there, but I'm spreading them out, so the mortars are going to have to try and range in again to get more than one base, and they won't get very many bases even if they do. The submachine gunners are trying to dig in the wood but failing, and on the other side, the near side in this case, the Storm guys have unpinned, but they're really just going to be firing with the machine guns into the Panzerfaust guys. I'm going to try and whittle them down, but the rest of my shooting goes well in that the artillery all combined managed to kill one of the heavy mortars and one of the medium mortars. So because there are 3 tube platoons, then they are now down to re-rolling successful hits. So the Finns have popped their ambush. You can just see it in the far field there. A couple of Pack 40s going to be shooting at long range against my heavy armour. Then the infantry have moved up towards the objective. The near wood has got the ordinary Finnish infantry platoon the middle wood beside the objective has got the submachine gun platoon, and here the Finns are worried about my submachine gunners and the infantry in the middle, and the near platoon is kind of angling towards the submachine guns to see if they can cause a bit of mischief there. The artillery doesn't really do anything this turn because of re-roll and hits been down to 2 tubes each, and the Pak 40s, as always when I use my heavies against medium anti-tank, I managed to fail a save at long range, but the Finns also failed the firepower, so I just have one bailed out ISU 152 that could easily have been a destroyed one. They're not the best weapon against heavy armour, these Pak 40s. They can still destroy them, and long range is also not the best way to engage with an ambush, but Finn felt, I think, under pressure here that he had to try and wear me down a bit, because the 2 mortar teams that are close to where those Paks are, they're beginning to suffer, and that's his only artillery, so I think he's looking to preserve them and keep them in the game. Turn 3 for both of us, we were just kind of facing up to each other and squaring off and shooting at this point. Some artillery on both sides and anti-tank fire from the Finns with the Pak 40s. Now, there was nothing really achieved here by either of us, and for me that was more of a problem, because I really need to get a bit of momentum and try and wear down the anti-tank guns so I can advance, and the super duper Panzerfaust platoon that's waiting for me up the other end of the table. The mortars are not so much of a concern for me now because of re-rolling successful hits, and I'm spreading my guys out. You can see the storm group on the far side is also spread out a bit now too, but I'm not making much progress, so I need to change things up now because the clock is ticking towards turn 6. No reserves on turn 3 for the Finns. So turn 4 and we're off. It's time to move forward. The company command tactically moved. The ISUs, they all dashed. It's now time for me to get up towards that objective with my ISUs, because the infantry won't be able to stand there. I have left the shock rifles where they are just now. They're in a position to move out, but it's very dangerous at the moment because of the proximity of the Finnish infantry and heavy machine guns near the crossroad. But the storm group's moving out too. That's going to expose them to a bit of fire coming their way, but you know, they are careful, they are concealed, so hopefully they can keep their heads down. And in terms of firing, the 122 battery of artillery is now focusing on the crossroads and got some pins, and the company command actually managed to kill one of the Pak 40s. In turn 5 things started to get hot, shall we say. First of all, I tactically moved up my ISUs to get within 8 inches of the objective, dashed up the 122s, moved the infantry out of the church. The submachine gunners by this point had been pretty well gubbed by artillery, unfortunately, and had retreated. And then the storm company, you can just about see them in the top left hand corner there, folks. So this is where anti-aircraft machine guns come in quite handy, as well as some good artillery rolls. I pinned both platoons beside the objective at the crossroads there with artillery, the 122s, and then the heavy machine gun and on the 152s, plus some shots from infantry, not many but some, really gutted that submachine gun platoon. Let me see, there's 2 bases left plus 1 from the company command, and both of those platoons ended up pinned from the artillery too. But then the Finnish armour has arrived too. There are, I think, about 5 T26s now going to machine gun my poor storm guys out in the open, and 3 T-34-85s backing up the Pak 40 to try and clobber my heavy armour, but no casualties yet. Now we're close to that objective, and Finn has got all these infantry with Fausts and special tank assault cars and everything. The first assault came in, but not many bases could actually make it into contact. One was close enough to fire off a Faust that actually managed to bail one of my 152, so I was getting a bit worried. But there was enough counterfire around to get enough hits to kill the bases that came in. So I survived that turn in the full knowledge that there was going to be a hell of a lot more assaults coming in very, very soon. So we're at turn 6 now, folks. It's getting at that critical time where the defender can win the game if they can bail out my tanks that are there or push me back. And as it was, in terms of my own shooting, I moved my ISU 122s over, and them combined with everything else around that group just machine gunned the infantry that were trying to put an attack in from the flank. It was quite brutal. And then the artillery concentrated on the objective. You can see the little red ranged in marker I've got there beside the wood at the crossroads. It continued to pin and get a couple of casualties on the reserves that were moving up to try and get involved, use their Faust and use their card. And then my company command managed to kill a T-34, as you can see, and the Pack 40s ran away. I should say the last of Finn's reserves has arrived, which is his company command for his T-26s. They're on the opposite side of the table from the T-26 platoon, and the T-26s are just kind of ineffectively trying to shoot up the Storm Company on one side and trying to shoot up my artillery on the other side, but nothing happening there. One of my ISU 152s was destroyed though. I think that was from a anti-tank 12 T-34. My front armour of 9 being true to form and failing the easy rolls. Now things are getting really messy around that objective. I am shooting up as much infantry as I can whilst positioning myself to give the most effective defensive fire against the assaults that are likely to come in. In that respect, I have moved up my shock rifles from the church, and the Storm group, they're far too busy to get involved here because they're keeping their heads down, digging themselves in against those T-26s and surviving quite well in the process. And Finn has moved his T-34s around to the side, and I've lost an ISU 122 from a side hit, and he is then moving up and flinging everything in to the assault, launching his Faust as he goes. He's brought the Panzerfaust platoon over. Now you can see them just across the top of my formation. They managed to get a couple of bales, and then he started launching assaults with the guys coming out of the wood. Not large platoons at all, but he's hoping that my defensive fire is going to be reduced accordingly. But I just had enough to pin him or to actually kill and destroy the teams that were moving in. The Panzerfaust platoon themselves didn't assault. They were too far away, so he just moved up and fired off 5 Panzerfausts. Had he wanted to assault with them, he would have to have done a follow me. He did a blitz so he could shoot. He wanted to get the shots in to try and get the bales to make the assault easier, rather than trying to get them into assault themselves without firing any Panzerfausts on the way in. As it was, he did get a couple of bales. So I'm getting a bit of leverage here now, causing a lot of casualties on the infantry. There's very little left, and the platoon behind the objective that tried to move up, he's having real bother getting them unpinned. Now in my own shooting back, I concentrated everything, even some of the Storm group's heavy machine guns that were far away. I've concentrated everything onto those Panzerfaust guys, because now they're in a position to assault me. I don't want that to happen, and I got them down to just 1 base. Incidentally, I am ignoring the T-34s and the T-26s. They can do their thing. I'm concentrating on the objective and the more immediate threat of an assault coming in against me and then me breaking off, and as a result losing the game because it's after turn 6. One thing of note, the ISU 152, a single ISU 152 for the Finns rode on, and when it was in position managed to bail out my company command. He got revenge next turn. He was lucky to be alive, but he got revenge because he killed it next turn. And then the infantry that were alive around the front of that wood, they launched some desperate assaults, but there was just far too much counterfire coming in against him. The platoon that was unable to unpin, they managed to get up towards the objective now, and they're sitting there saying, come ahead. They've still got a Faust, they've still got that card that can be played to give them a tank or tank assault 3, but I'm not going to launch an assault against him, because if I break off, that will be the end of the game. He could push me away from the objective. So I just did some more shooting at them, once again ignoring everything else on the table, caused quite a few casualties, and Finn decided at that point that it was game over. They were only maybe another one turn away from being wiped out, so he conceded at that point. So there you go, folks. That's these guys used against tough anti-tank, tank killing type infantry, where having anti-aircraft MGs on the vehicles was absolutely essential, and being able to get some infantry support up around them without them being destroyed by artillery on the way in really improved the defensive fire at the critical turns. So 2 informative games for me, and hopefully for you as well. It's given me some thoughts about what do I do with my list to play a wider range of mission stances and types. In the past I just thought of that as an attacking force, but you'd no idea what you're going to be doing until you start playing. So the most important thing I think is I've got to get rid of the hero shock rifles, because it's like, I think 27 points for 2 platoons and the command. Now you can make it a bit cheaper by getting rid of the storm group, just taking shock rifles, but you know, if you're not going to take a storm group, why take the shock rifles? I'm just going to go for my normal small sized hero motor rifles. 2 platoons then plus company command. And then that allows me to do a few tweaks with artillery and to get a platoon of T-34s. Just a small platoon, but it's a platoon, and that will give me a bit more mobility for when the big guns are square up to whatever it is I'm fighting against, or I've got to worry about my flanks in particular missions, you know, where the reserves come on in my flank or scattered reserves. A platoon of T-34s for a bit more flexibility. But let's go and look at that in a bit of detail. This then, folks, is a list I will try in the next game, unless of course I come up with any ideas between now and then. So we've got the heavy assault guns. The difference between this formation and the last one is a smaller SMG platoon, as they're really just there to help keep these guys, the big guys, on the table. I don't need to spend too many points on them. It means they're definitely going to be keeping their heads down and out of the way, but there's nothing wrong with that. And then, instead of the shock rifle formation, I'm going for my favourite, really, which is the hero motor rifles. You know, I like the shock rifles for something different for the storm group, but I'm finding it quite tricky to get any to get the benefit of the extra points that you spend on those expensive units. So this has got the company HQ, then 2 units of 7 plus command and the commissar. So it's like 8 bases plus the commissar. Smaller platoons, but I do prefer to use smaller platoons myself, folks. Big massive platoons can be so easily killed with templates, and it's so hard to hide them, move them through terrain in a safe way and so on. So I do prefer smaller units. So there's 2 smaller units of infantry, backed up by the good old 6-tube medium mortars and 3 heavy mortars. This 3 points here could be swapped out for other things if you like to use cards like the RPG cards, or you want one of the lucky cards or such likes, folks. because there is still this plus these for bombardment, but I'm going with these just to be really punishing against infantry and gun targets. And then the runaround option that I need, it's not massive, but it doesn't have to be if the timing is right, is 4 Hero T-34s, one of them being an 85. So these guys are quite different in character from the shock rifles, and I've got a few more sort of strings to the bow, because using these here instead of the single 122mm, remember these guys hit just as hard if you don't lose one of them. You know, then if they're not put down to 2, they hit just as hard as the 122mm artillery. So swapping them out, reducing these, gives me a good runaround platoon, so that if my flanks are threatened, or if I have scattered reserves, especially with their 24-inch cross-country dash, they can get to the important area off the table really quick, whilst these guys are maybe going head to head with whatever it is that I am attacking or trying to protect myself from. So next time you see these guys on the table, this is how they're likely to be. Well, there you go, folks. Hopefully you found that useful and a couple of interesting games to look at. I am definitely wanting to keep playing my assault guns, because I really like the figures, and you know, they do have things that really work in their favour in certain situations. So I'm going to be sticking with them, and if you're interested in playing them, then hopefully this video has helped you get a few ideas off your own. So thanks again for watching, folks. Thanks again to all the subscribers out there, and as always, if you'd like to subscribe, please do so to help us build the channel. And if you hit the bell button, then we'll definitely see you on the next one.